Hello, hello. Welcome, everyone. So excited that you're here and enjoying this awesome session. I have the honor to introduce our speaker for today, and that is Francesco D'Alessio. Francesco, I didn't ask about the last name. How did I do?
You did perfect. A lot of
Okay.
people struggle, so that was brilliant.
All right. I'll take it.
Thank
I'll
you.
take it. Yeah. So I'm sure if you're on this call, you probably already know Francesco because he's got the wildly popular Keep Productive YouTube channel and just keeps going for years and years. And just recently, he came out with collaborated. I'm not sure how I don't want to know more. The amazing Bento app, which I have, pulled up on my phone, and it's beautiful. It's simple. It's pretty cool. And so specifically in this session, Francesco is going to talk about how he organizes meetings with none other than himself. And I'm really excited because I think I can learn a lot from this as well. So yeah, without further ado, Francesco, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you, Nick, for the lovely, lovely warm welcome. I appreciate you having me here and for everyone else who's joining to dive into this topic. I think it'd be quite exciting. I I love that comment from Tony as we started, who said, I cancelled the meeting with myself for this. That sets a tone, right? But yeah, I'm really excited to dig a little bit deeper into the topic. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, I'm super excited you're here. I think we can kind of get the party started and I'll turn it back over to you, Francesco.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Nick, and Dan also for setting us all up. So yeah, today I thought it'd be an interesting topic to talk a little bit about a meeting with yourself and sort of running through how I go about doing that and sort of how historically meetings with yourselves have been sort of used. Talking a little bit about the sort of mindfulness aspect of it, and then sharing a little bit around how I implement that in a note-taking application. So I'm really excited to jump in. I've got a slides to help me out. So yeah, personal meetings. It's a concept that it's actually been around for quite a while now. I think the sort of first popularization of it was in Getting Things Done by David Allen, when he talked a lot about weekly reviews and how you can spend a bit of time overviewing how your week's gone and how you can sort of implement actions for the weeks after. But I think in the next couple of years, weekly sort of personal meetings in general are going to become a lot more popular, a lot more needed, and a lot more effective. So I want to run through how you can go about doing that. I think a lot of the things, a lot of the reasons why I think they're going to become more popular is mainly because a lot of more people are going into the gig economy, freelancers, remote workers, and we do have not all the time in the world, but a little bit more time in our week to zoom out and to reflect on how we're doing. And the good news is I think a lot of companies and a lot of bosses and a lot of co-workers are becoming more respectful that this sort of time that we spend on personal productivity can have massive amount of benefits in the long run, especially to your own day-to-day productivity. And I want to talk a little bit about sort of meetings as a state of how they are now. And we do a lot of meetings. So I think what I want to talk a little bit about is how we can differentiate these meetings compared to maybe what you're seeing on screen, the sort of popping of messages, the sort of noise, the potentially long coffee sessions that we need before going into an online or a physical meeting. I think they're very different. I think this sort of meeting, hopefully I can frame to you all as potentially very mindful as we sort of go into our work days. But we had a lot of meetings, especially between the years of 2020 and 2022, lots of Zoom ones. So this is a good meeting compared to those. I'm sure many in the comments will have stories about it. And as I was saying, there is this existing concept out there. This is an outline that Todoist produce about the weekly review, and we're very used to it being a sort of a time to declutter and then to reflect on how the weeks are gone and to progress forward. This version I'll talk through is actually one that I've sort of slimmed down even more, because I personally, for me at least, find that the sort of mind, the decluttering and actually the thinking largely bigger comes at different points around a sort of typical planning quarter. So before I begin, as the lovely Nick mentioned, I do have a new app called Bento. And this is, I did want to mention it before because I'm starting to think a bit more about like sort of mindful productivity, as you can tell. So that's why this topic is also on my mind too, about having personal meetings. And that's what we tried doing, at least with Bento, is trying to reduce the amount of sort of stress when it comes to task management. So I think I'll be about, I think I said to Nick, about 20 to 25 minutes potentially. And I've broken it down into 4 sections. The role of personal meetings, just to talk a little bit further on how they can be beneficial, the frequency of how you can implement them. And I'll speak a little bit to the sort of mindfulness aspects in there. And then talk about how I do a 3-part process in meetings with myself. And finally, a note-taking application that I use, but obviously that can open up the conversation to a lot of about how you can implement it into your own systems, and naturally starting to linking your thinking to. So yeah, the role of personal meetings is obviously something that we've, as I said, seen a little bit before, sort of weekly reviews. But the way that I personally see personal meetings is it's slightly different from journaling. Journaling typically comes as part of your routine or your day, where you are trying to get a sense of your feelings and your mood. Whereas with your weekly meeting or your personal meeting, it's sort of a before and after actionable items and bringing it together. So I think that's the way that I differentiate this from, say, fixed journaling. But they do, in some ways, clash to some extent. But they are sort of with the personal meetings, a before and an after. We have some sort of tangible modifications to the next week ahead or the next month ahead that we can use. And I've been doing personal meetings at least for maybe about 4 or 5 years in different formats, and I've tried a lot of different ways. But in the sort of high end stuff, I typically try to plan, review the week before, plan the next 3 months, or at least zoom out for a moment, and then look to the week ahead. And that seems to be something that I've stuck with over the time, and I'll show you in the templates or the note-taking side of stuff in a bit. So how often to run these sorts of meetings? I want to talk a little bit about the sort of framework around sort of rules that I've applied to having a personal meeting. This is a Japanese tea ceremony, and they can typically take quite a long time. I've at least heard of sessions that are up to sort of 4 hours, and others I think have been longer. But I really like this concept when applied to the sort of meeting realm or with yourself, because I think whilst I wouldn't necessarily do a 4-hour meeting with myself, that might just be a bit too long, although that, you know, it could be helpful. They sort of reflect what I think is and should be a good environment for you to have a meeting with yourself. So in a Japanese tea ceremony, they take a nice long time to prepare the cups and the dishes, making sure they're cleaned, and then they move on to the process of, you know, brewing and then having it, but obviously over much longer periods of time. And the rules that I sort of set for myself for these personal meetings are pretty much weekly. I don't let them go over 60 minutes. They're normally pretty strictly at about half an hour. And they really do follow a very focused rule of the environment around me. So whilst I won't do any decluttering of the sense of emails, other stuff like that, because I feel like over the years, at least, I've learned that when you do that before you're doing your weekly meeting, you clear your emails, you clear your in tray, you clear this. I feel like sometimes that can disrupt your thinking process as you're going about your personal meetings. And because of all the things that crop up, subconscious thoughts about what you replied to this email, a new thing that's popped up that's urgent maybe, and that can really stop the quality of your decisions and thoughts as you're doing this personal meeting. The other thing as well is, for me at least, I now luckily have a garden office, which is very, very nice. I'm very grateful. Before I made sure I went to a coffee shop where I knew less people, because I will end up bumping into somebody and chatting for ages with them, or they come in and I'm like, oh, I go to a place basically where it's very much calm, collected, stick my headphones on and make sure it's a very zoned out environment in terms of I have probably some lo-fi hip hop on, or maybe something a little bit more calming on. But the reason why I do that is because sometimes in our day, and I think this is quite common in the productivity space, is we a lot of the time substitute productivity, we substitute mindfulness for productivity, and we don't tend to find the moments to sort of pause. And at least for myself, like I do probably 2 meditations a week, and I probably did like a little bit more sort of mindfulness practices, but at least I find that this personal meeting has become the mindfulness practice, just because it helps me to zone out, it helps me to think a bit more clearly, and that's why you should make the environment relaxing. And with that, you do have to plan it in your calendar. Obviously, Tony's missed it for this, but it should be very much time blocked, and it should be very much protected, and it should be where you find very little distraction from what other people do what other people can come into that. For me, I think I normally do it on a Thursday afternoon. I may order a carrot cake and have it with it. But at least I just make sure that nobody interrupts me during that period of time. And I make sure that, we got a 2-year-old, he's not coming just this half an hour at least. So yeah, it's in terms of my rules or sort of frequency, this is how I approach it. I think I talked a little bit to it here, but some additional sort of notes that I've learned on the right-hand side is just a good example of how you can block your time. Obviously, very simple. Everyone sort of knows how to do that. But I think what I alluded to here with Zoom outs is, whilst this is a weekly practice, I actually do other Zoom outs when I feel the sense of I need some time to zoom out of a project and see something. And I do workshops every 3 months, which are probably an hour to an hour and a half long, which are much bigger in-depth conversations. And they look at 6 to 12 months worth of work. And these personal meetings focus on 1 week to 3 months. They really don't go beyond that. So the theme I sort of go with is past, present, future with this 3-part process. It's like sort of looking at the past, snapshotting the present, and trying to look to the future and connect all the dots. A little bit of a sort of Scrooge approach. So in terms of the 3-part personal meetings process that I go through, the first part is very similar to what we see in GTD's David Allen, minus the decluttering aspect and inboxizing. Don't know the word. Processing your inboxes. It's unpacking the week. So it's basically looking at how the week went before. And I would say it's partially journaling, partially looking at the sort of the things that went well and the things that went not so good. And then it touches on, you move to the next stage of the process, which is the major pillars. And this is looking at sort of big areas of your life, and they'll be different for everyone, obviously. When I started this, I used to have categories like personal, social, academic, because I was in university, and personal, academic, social, and there was a fourth one. I'm going to annoy myself now because it's really obvious. Professional. As you can see, like it's sort of correlated to it. But now I sort of have health, family, work, and maybe 1 or 2 other projects I'm working on. And then that is really looking at 3 months of a snapshot ahead. And the main reason is because you're looking at the week before, you're looking at the present, and then obviously a bit of the future in terms of what's up for the next 3 months and what are your sort of goals. And then you're coming back to next actions, which is very simply, what are you going to do the week after that correlates to your major pillars in terms of your goals and objectives, and what lessons have you learned from the unpacking the week before that you won't make in this next actions. So that's how I approach it as a sort of 3-step process. It's very similar to, it sort of combines a weekly review process, but also combines how other people tend to do a little bit of journaling and sort of workshop planning. But I find that it's what actually is, it's not too much, it's not too intense for, say, doing weekly, but it still gets you on the path to focusing on the future, but in a sort of short-term to medium-term capacity. I always find if I do like, before I did like unpacking the week and then looking at like my 6 to 12 month goals and then sort of planning the next month. And that was just a bit overwhelming because I was like, oh my God, there's quite a lot here that I need to do. And I felt a sort of sense of like, oh, okay, this isn't working as well. But I feel, at least for myself, and hopefully if you pick up some bits from it, that this is a nice balance between a short-term and medium-term process for your personal meetings. So that totally takes me to the note-taking aspect of it and how I structure that in note-taking tools. Obviously, we all know there's lots of services out there, and you can pretty much use whatever note-taking service you want to use. And obviously, there's plenty of journaling apps that you could replicate the same process in. There's plenty of services that are available. Obviously, this process lends itself to quite heavily the bidirectional linking. And as I said before, I think I mentioned during that period of time, I don't do any administration. I just solely stick to full screen modes on these apps and trying not to be distracted by other things that pop into the system that can potentially derail the meeting. So previously, this is how I did it. Well, I say that I still occasionally do this weekly edition of it in the Remarkable tablet, so paper-like tablet. And as you can see, it follows that very simple week audit at the top. You know, a large portion of the page is written hand. And then the second one is major pillars. So they're all the major pillars that will follow, you know, the health, the sort of family, the work, and maybe certain projects that are quite sort of 3-month based. And then the next actions and sort of breaking down them next to the major pillars so that you can at least see what ones you're moving forward with each thing. Inside of a note-taking application, I currently use Mem as my note taker. So as you can see here, very much the week audit is exploring the last week, struggles, worries, and things that went well. So in a way, it does allow me to do a slight bit of journaling, but again, it's really looking at the sort of tangible stuff that I sort of can come away with to apply to the next actions. The major pillars I use actually inside of MEM. I have a sort of responsibilities area that I sort of keep pretty refreshed. And you can see that it sort of breaks down a lot of the categories. But I also have a sort of a bare list of like, family health family health work, and then any major projects that I'm working on. So you can connect those up and obviously make it easier. In MEM, you can, like many of the other note-taking applications nowadays, you can pop it alongside of it at the same time. But they just help me to sort of do a bit of a breakdown of the major pillars. And it allows me to sort of like look at the sort of 3-month objectives and go, okay, zoom out overview of them. How are things going? And then the next actions at the bottom allow me to fully plan the week out, looking at that sort of 3-month zoom out. You can see here on the right-hand side, this is a feature that they do have called MEMX, where you can see correlated notes that are similar to it. So you can see all these zoom outs that I did before, which are just baby versions of this process, but not this process, just more like a sort of ongoing, a focus on more of a worry or a struggle or something that I want to deconstruct. But mainly this is the one that continues weekly. I don't know whether we want to talk about specifics of how these features work, but typically it's like in the flows section, and you can basically set up templates where you can replicate. You can even have this scheduled come up, or you can actually, you can basically have it where you just create it from scratch like a template. Okay. Oh, wow. I didn't expect to go through it that fast. But yeah, so I think these personal meetings can be just a really effective sort of mindful meeting every single week. And I just want to sort of re-emphasize the value in actually is actually making them more mindfully orientated, just because we don't get it enough in our days, I don't think. And taking that time out and making the actual process of it very much to the Japanese tea ceremony very calming, very relaxing, and almost elongating a process that you would do before, but sort of stretched out and made much more mindful, essentially. So that's the presentation side of stuff. Obviously, we can go to questions now, but if anybody wants to follow along on Twitter, you can do that, Francesco D'Alessio. But yeah, I think it's going to be hopefully a really interesting discussion to sort of dig a little bit deeper into it, because it's the first time I'm sort of sharing it a little bit publicly. So
that's great, Francesco. So first, we got to give a round of applause, digital style. So let's see, let's see some icons. Well, whatever we can do. I guess it's just going to be in the chat. So let's see that come in. And as we do this transition, we have opened up the Q&A just recently. So I want you to jump back into the Q&A, everybody, and upvote the questions. Oh, the chat's filling up now. They love you. They love you, Francesco. Upvote over there, fill up the chat a little bit. And if I can, before we jump into those questions, Francesco, and just give you a second to kind of read through a few. Yeah, sure. I want everyone in the chat to transition from that ongoing round of applause that is still going and echoing throughout the digital interwebs. So if we can pause all of the adulation towards Francesco, they love you. We're going to transition to some takeaways so far. So part of this idea is I want to make you active here. What is something that you made note of? What is something that resonated with you, that sparked within you when you heard Francesco talking about that? Type that in the chat real fast. What is something that resonated? What is something that, I don't know, sparked in some way? Go ahead and throw that in the chat. I can just read a few out loud. To be mindful, intentionality, to change my location and be mindful. The tea ceremony metaphor, the ritual aspect of it all. These are just a few. I'm sure they're going to continue flying in. It's really important to, crowdsource our learning here. So hopefully you can look in the chat as well and take away a few that you weren't like, oh yeah, that's a good reminder. When Francesco said that really resonated. So I'm going to kind of turn it back over to you, Francesco, and I can assist along with Dan in the Q&A. But if you can see those, feel free to take them away, or I can shout them out to you.
Yeah, I'll start cracking through these. I like in some of the comments about like, don't make sure you takeaways of obviously eat carrot cake during it. Don't bring a 2-year-old. These are brilliant. Yeah, but a lot of these, I think it's I think the key thing that sort of is different from this process to say another like weekly reviews is this sort of mindfulness aspect. I think one of the top comments here is obviously from the man, the legend, Danny Hatcher. Good to see you, Danny. Is a personal meeting like a reflection or review? And 100% is. That's what I was a little bit worried about going into this with, because obviously it is very similar to the processes like G2D in getting things done and the sort of weekly review. But it was also like what a lot of people call like a personal retreat, which is potentially a day or two away, where you can look at your aspects of business and health and family and work and how they all intertwine with each other. I think what's slightly different is the fact that it's sort of a 30-minute more mindful practice that cuts out potentially administrating your productivity and focuses more on short to medium term objectives, which I don't think there's as many personal meetings that do that. They tend to want you to think more long term or more short term in terms of clearing your productivity inbox all the way to sort of what are your yearly objectives. So that's how I would differ it, but obviously it is very similar in a sense. So and the same question from Martine, good to see you here. And it sort of touches on that's how they differ, the weekly meeting. So there's one from David. When in the week do you do your personal meetings? Start of the week or on the weekends? Obviously, it's really dependent on what type of person you are, I think. But for me, at least, I do mine on Thursday afternoon. I'm not sure why. I think it's because I tend to find my energy levels drop quite a lot on Friday, just because I'm smoked from the week. And Fridays are normally a sort of admin day or just general sort of like crushing smaller tasks in my sort of daily routine. So that's when I do it. Obviously, some people might find value on doing it on a Sunday evening before they start the week, and that could be incredibly useful. But yeah, that's a really good question, David. Mehmet, so will Bento be available on Android in the future? Coming soon, for sure. I can't tell you dates because I would put the developers too much pressure. Matthias says, how much time do you do the first weekly reviews when you started? Yeah, it's a really good question. When I started doing the David Allen weekly review process, I typically found that I would do it, maybe it was like 45 minutes long. And I was always, I'm always looking to sort of condense a meeting down, but it takes pretty similar time. But I just find out that sort of doing this process helped a little bit more. Danny Hatcher again, how does your review work? with your notes and research, exploring interests, curiosities, and learning topics? Yeah, that's a really good question again. I weirdly am not as much of a note taker, just because I don't really find, for me at least, I've done it with different like learning topics and things like that. I'm like, you shouldn't be here, Francesco. I explore ideas in terms of like when I get the tablet out and sort of visualize it and bring ideas out and sort of express it creatively, but I never really bring it to notes. But I can see how this sort of process might be useful for the connecting and by directional links as well. And I have started doing some of that inside of Mem, so it has been quite helpful for that at least. Isaac says, how do you use Bento in your personal meetings process? Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I think I tend to use it at the start of it because obviously I'm reviewing the last week, and I'll take maybe some of the large tasks that I have or medium tasks and be like, oh, those were wins in the week. So sometimes I do keep my Bento boxes open for the week, and I do bring them in when I'm like, oh, okay, I can see them alongside and sort of what I accomplished. So that's quite helpful. So that's, I would say, how it weaves in. Hung Su, what are some kind of personal meetings that are not a weekly? What are some kind of personal meetings that are not a weekly review? So yeah, I think what you meant there is like, how does it differ again, I guess? But I think what you mean, what would be helpful as an answer is, I think that's what I mean about the weekly reviews is it's different because it focuses less on administration and more on mindfulness. Jay says, do you do work and personal at the same time, or just work, just personal, or two separate meetings? Dependent on how intense things are, I may do one separately. And that's a really good question. Sometimes if there are a lot of things that are like, I'm like, I've eaten too much carrot cake or I haven't been to the gym, or, you know, and maybe I'm lacking in sleep, then I might do a focused personal one. But if not, I'll sort of combine them both. But it can be a useful practice to separate the two, especially if you want to do it on, say, you may want to do this sort of one on a Friday at the end of a work week and your other one on a Sunday, just to sort of set yourself up, or sort of play around with it. Derek Oak says, how do you know your meeting with yourself was effective? Is effective important for you here, or rewarding or calming sufficient? I think as long as I come away from that meeting feeling a sense of confidence that I have a sort of at least a awareness of what the goals are, because what's helpful with that meeting is I can go like, okay, what am I aiming for here? Because sometimes we just sort of stack a week on, and just sort of forget about what's really long-term, well, not long-term, sort of medium-term useful. And that sort of helps me to do it. So coming away with a sense of calm, a sense of awareness of what's coming up, and a confidence that I can go forward with this is normally the benchmark, ideally. Cara, well, it's a deep question. What's one of the best discoveries you made in a meeting with yourself? Normally the best ones are like sleep orientated or like health orientated a lot of the time. Like, for example, like it's normally when I do that sort of first part of the process of looking and sort of reviewing the last week and then looking at the major pillars, I tend to find like it's just health related. Like I'm doing 2 or 3 things wrong in my routine and I change them and I feel a lot more energetic. And again, on that topic, energy levels, like whenever I find a discovery that I always find I'm really unproductive on like a Friday or like a Tuesday because I burn myself out from a Monday sometimes, very rarely. But when I do that, I'm like, I should change my energy levels in terms of stuff. And that's always really nice to find out. BROLL says, what questions do you find most long-lastingly productive? I'm not sure what you mean here. Let me come back to that when I'll read it again. It's late here in the UK, so my energy brain is not good. Bruno, how do your notes make it into your calendar? I don't pop them in my calendar. There is a feature in Mem where if I have created the time block in advance, I basically can create an event from it, which is quite cool, but I don't think it actually land on my calendar in terms of I can view them in my calendar app. But yeah, it's I guess it's helpful to see it. I can go back and see them, which is nice. And that's what the Memex feature does, at least, is like help you connect the previous ones with. Shana says, are you using different programs for different activities, like Mem for review, Bento for zooming in on the day? Do you find this tedious if you carry over thoughts and tasks from place to place? I think that because they're different. So with Mem, that's very much I'll probably go into Mem like 3 times a week, maybe, give or take. And with Bento, I'm using that every sort of day to zoom in on the tasks. So I don't really find it too difficult. But then I've sort of got a custom setup to some extent here, haven't I? Probably not what everyone else has in terms of their setup. Hopefully that answered that. I'm not sure. Mehmet says, how would you define differences between your meetings with yourself and meditating about the week? Yes, that's a good question. The difference is that when I come out of a meditation, I just try and clear my head of everything. But when I come out of this mindful meeting, I at least feel a bit of direction with it, if you make sense. Obviously, come out of meditation feeling a little bit more relaxed and sort of sort of jigged for the day. But definitely coming out of these personal meetings, I feel a lot more, okay. I feel more confident, definitely. Definitely. David, how do you, what do you struggle with the most when you're holding your personal meetings? Before it was finding the space to do it. Like it was just, I think this was a problem with COVID and then having a child at the same time, getting away from sort of the noise of the day and sort of finding space. That was like a bit of a struggle in terms of the environment. The other thing as well, no, I don't think there's any other problems with it that I can find. But you always, like, this is, I guess, like a 4 years in the making, slowly carve it better and better each time. So Calvin says, do you keep a running file of questions you'd like to spend time on in the meeting? So that's mainly where the major pillars come in. They're sort of the questions, because they're like, okay, here's a major pillar. Here's some of the goals that I want to achieve in the next 3 months with them. And then I sort of keep that on. So they mainly live in the responsibilities area. I sort of removed some of the objectives just for my own personal, privacy. But at the same time, they're like a sort of file of questions that I can do and sort of look at. So that's where the sort of linking the two together are really helpful. So Deb says, do you review your calendar productivity notes apps when you're reviewing past week and when planning next one, since it's not administrative? I tend to just embed that as part of my daily routine. I'm very lucky to be working for myself. So I guess I have a bit more of a flexible schedule. But when I look at my calendar and my emails, at least, which are the most sort of intensified things, I normally do that in the first, maybe the first sort of non-task area of my day. So that might be like 10:30 and 3:30 when the day's ending, versus that's when any admin's done, so that I can actually focus on the big task of the day, or the medium task and things like that. Hopefully that helped. Jeet says, maybe I missed, but do you incorporate the mindfulness aspect into the personal meeting? Any rituals to practice? Yeah, so as I said, like just keeping the space clean and clear, putting on some really relaxing music, maybe just doing it near a window, keeping fresh air coming in, keeping it quite well lit, but not too lit with white lights. If there is that carrot cake nearby, that's very mindful. But yeah, so just having that environment around you that's non-distractive. Dean said, why did you build Bento app when there are many task management apps out there? What does Bento do that the others got wrong? So very simply, Bento is not a task manager. It basically is a methodology that you can apply on top. So it limits you. That's what task managers do right now. They give you as much abundance as possible to add as much as you want. Bento only asks you, what's your large task, medium, and small task, and helps you to focus on those and limits you to just those. It forces you to think of your meaningful tasks. And each time you use it, it gets more effective because, well, you're limited to what you can focus on in a day. So it's a forcing process, but a good one. Good force. Enrico is a classic Evernote user from the past. Good to see you here, Enrico. You used to be heavily invested in Evernote. What was the note-taking tool you showed us today, and how does it help you to hold more effective meetings with yourself? For a while I did go back with Evernote, but I just feel like the tool that I was using today is Mem, and what I quite like about it is the process around the flows. Basically what it does is helps you set up some really easy to use templates, and I really like the search functionality and the capture functionality as well. It just seems a lot more sort of intuitive versus what I had in Evernote, at least. But I think Evernote's my sort of filing cabinet. Isaac, did I do that one? Do you do sense making in your personal meeting process? Do you mean like burning incense? I don't know. Nick,
Isaac's referring, yeah. Like making sense of the world, like asking maybe philosophical forms of questions.
That makes sense now. No, because that's for the workshops that are every sort of quarter. But yeah, those ones do sort of philosophical stuff. Yeah. Thank you for that. I was thinking about like what to get out and candles and stuff. How would you define the difference between your meetings? We answered that one. Just basically, more actionable confidence coming out. Yeah, smashing questions, from everyone. Crikey.
Yeah, let's just give you a quick break there, Francesco, with another digital Zoom round of applause. So explode the chat up a little bit, and this is a good time that we can kind of take on the next aspect of making notes with each presentation. So Francesco, something I hit on for those who were at the keynote, if not, I'll just hit it here, is that we want to kind of dig into this stuff in a lightweight way, but make it personal and add some meaning. So what we were doing right before the Q&A, hey, what resonated with you? What sparked with you? Okay, well, now we're going to take it one further, everyone, before we transition to kind of wrap things up, which is, what is a takeaway that you got from Francesco's amazing session? What is something that you are taking away from this? So go ahead, give it a second. And when you're ready, type it in the chat so we can kind of see some takeaways from this section. Weekly review instead of a daily review. If I can just add on to that one, I thought it was really interesting that you do your personal reviews on a Thursday, Francesco, because I think weekly review, I always think it's Sunday afternoon, evening. Like that's when it has to be. I don't know where I was programmed with that, but it makes a lot of sense to have it as part of the work week, the typical work week.
Yeah. Obviously it's different for everyone, but I did it mainly just on energy levels. Like when I just found normally Sunday, I would find myself pretty stressed out after watching Formula One or something like that. And then I'm like, I can't be doing any work before the week. But then sometimes I have done on those times when I felt a little bit more energetic. And then you do feel that sense of like, oh yeah, I'm going into the week with a sort of confidence. But then at the same time, if I do it on a Thursday, I go into the weekend feeling, all right, I've got next week set up. I feel confident. But yeah, it's different for everyone, isn't it?
Yeah. Taking a moment, reading through this, all these takeaways, what takeaway did you have? And then try to think about some of these other ones that are showing up, because this really helps our process, I think. Uji says, interesting, I do weekly reviews on Friday. So that's cool. I think the personal meeting too, and how you described it, I don't know. This is like a trend, I think, with Francesco's life right now. It's a lot more like you're going Zen. Like I love it. It's Bento, right? It's like simplicity. It's beautiful. It's calming. And then the personal review, it's built around these mindful, intentional activities.
Yeah, I've just been doing like some weird just watching loads of like Japanese related documentaries on YouTube, and then just getting carried away and be like, oh, why don't we? And then just talking to great people about mindful productivity, like Anne Law, and reading all about how we're heading in that direction, aren't we? Really, all of us. Hopefully, in terms of like a more sort of embracing life outside of work. So yeah, it's been on my mind a lot.
Well, it shows, and I really enjoy and appreciate that sort of holistic flavor it provides. It's aspirational. It's something for me to aspire to myself, and to try to work towards that, because it's like kind of a counter signal to the noise, all the information that's around us. And you're saying, hey, there are some other ways that are helpful that I found. So I really like that. I'm just going to throw in the 2 links for you, because I'm not sure if you're going to mention them, and I want to make sure that they get mentioned.
Thank you.
Your awesome YouTube channel. If you guys haven't already, everyone, check out the YouTube channel with Keep Productive. You probably already are subscribed, but if not, that definitely helps any sort of YouTuber. So I definitely want to suggest that. And try out Bento. I think there's something really fantastic with the forcing function of Bento. It's really quite cool.
Thank you. I'm biased, but of course. Thank you. No, very kind. I know I appreciate everyone stopping by and also sort of diving into the takeaways are really interesting. I think it does help to sort of collectively look at like, all right, what's everyone learned? Because everyone's is slightly different on this sort of sense, which is really nice. Yeah, kudos.
Yeah. I'm trying to think if there are a couple other things. And Dan, my co-pilot, feel free to unmute, because I think I probably have left something out, and I want to make sure that we get that.
Oh, we're near the end, and I think at this point it's great to show some appreciation for everyone being here, and also to our awesome guest, Francesco. Thank you so much for sharing your presentation, the insight, and would love to encourage everyone to continue the conversation on Twitter and use the hashtag, the name of this conference, linking your thinking conference without the spaces, and just put the number sign or tag the Twitter account, the_light, LYT_way. And with that, we are inviting you for our next session, which is happening in the next few hours. And I just dropped the link in the chat and you can check that out. And if you do have any more questions, we'd love to answer them. So you can email us right here. That's a lot. I hope that's helpful. Yeah, there you go, Nick.
Yeah, thanks for that, Dan. Francesco, did you have?
No, I'm just saying thank you, Dan. Appreciate it, both of you, for having me, and obviously all of your stuff you're doing is really fantastic. Underrated is what I call you guys. Super job you're doing. So thank you for inviting me and having me here. So yeah, let's definitely carry on the chat on Twitter for sure.
Okay, well, wonderful. So one more virtual round of applause. And I get the liberty that you can see I'm doing a physical round of applause. This was amazing, Francesco. I am scheduling a personal meeting actually for this Thursday now, inspired by this. And when in the chat is everyone else going to do their personal meeting? Yeah, what day is it? Let's see in the chat real fast before we sign this off. Give me a day. Give me a day. We have some Thursdays.
Like, Thursdays, yeah.
Friday,
carrot cake,
Sunday.
coffee shops. I love it, guys. Yeah, carrot cake's good, for sure. Thank you all, honestly.
Thank you, Francesco. So we're going to sign this thing off. So thanks, everyone. Thank you.
See you later, Reverend. Bye.
Bye-bye.